Hey Rock Youth, it's Luke. I'm super excited to be speaking this morning. But before we get into the message, we're going to start off with a time of worship. We're going to start off with a psalm reading for our worship time, so check this out.
Hi guys, it's Alyssa, and today I'm going to be reading the psalm, and it's Psalm 118. It says, "In my distress I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me free. The Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? Yes, the Lord is for me. He will help me. I will look in triumph at those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes." Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you that you have set us free and that we can take refuge in you and that we can find our strength in you. Please help us today just to learn a lot from the message. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Hey guys, it's Super Bowl Sunday, as some of you might care or not care at all. It's totally cool. I'm rooting for Tom Brady because he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT of GOATs. But anyway, today my message is titled Filter Out the Noise. So I don't know about you, but I have this friend who, whenever we're saying something, he mishears whatever we're saying. There was this one time, it was about a month ago, when me and a couple other of my friends were talking. We're going to go on a hike that morning. So we're talking, we're like, yeah, so what morning are we going hiking? And he comes up to us, like, he's about a foot away, but he's not really listening. And he says, "Oh, you guys are getting hot dogs?" Which is totally not what we were saying. And I know that might not really seem like that story makes any kind of sense at all. Like, why would I be telling that? And it's not even like a cool story. It's just like something that happened once. But basically, that kind of ties into my message this morning because I'm talking about how sometimes it's hard for us to hear from the Lord. Maybe we're trying to pay attention. Maybe we're really setting aside time for God. Maybe we're we talk a lot about in the Rock Youth, we talk a lot about spending time with Jesus and prioritizing that time. But even sometimes for me, when I'm prioritizing that time, when I'm consistently spending alone time with God, sometimes there are weeks where it's hard for me to hear from the Lord. And it might feel frustrating, it might feel confusing, but it's super common and it happens to all of us. In Psalm 13, David talks about how, he who had such a huge heart for the Lord, even he couldn't hear from God sometimes. In verse 1, it says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" And that might seem super dramatic, but that's how David felt in that moment where he so couldn't hear from the Lord that he felt like God was hiding from him. So this morning I'm going to be sharing 3 or 4 things that have been really big in my walk with God in terms of hearing from God in those seasons where even if it feels like I'm pushing and I'm spending time in prayer and I'm pressing into God's presence, just 3 or 4 tips on how to really hear from the Lord in those seasons. So my first point is to check your content. So me personally, I'm a really big podcast guy. My podcast output per week is 18 hours. I listen to 3 or 4 shows that have a couple episodes a week, and they're mostly about sports, just a couple about movies. And then by the end of the week, when I'm done with all my regular content, I'll kind of go back to 1 or 2 little interviews with celebrities, actors or athletes that I think are my favorite actors or athletes. So my podcast output is really, really big. And it's you might think, oh, well, podcasts, that's fine. You're listening to stuff about movies and sports, cool. That's not going to influence your time with the Lord at all. But personally, there have been times where I'm praying right after I listen to something, or right after maybe you just watched I remember when I was a kid, I saw a tweet about this too. When I was a kid, have you ever, when you watched a movie when you were a kid, you watch it, you go out of the movie theater, and you start to think wow, you kind of start to really empathize with the main character of the movie. You start to, maybe after a superhero movie, you walk out and you feel oh, I'm really, I'm gonna do all these cool things, and I say when I was a kid, and this really might be 6 months ago for me personally, but anyway, the stuff that we watch and the stuff that we listen to really influences our thoughts, especially when it's for me, right before my prayer time. So there was one morning a week ago when I was praying, and I just finished listening to a podcast about sports. It wasn't anything bad, but then I go straight from my podcast into my prayer time. And it was really hard for me to separate my head from what I was listening to before and to focus on the Lord. And in Luke chapter 11, it says, "No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light. But when it's bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore be careful, lest the light in you be darkness. If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light." So basically what that's saying is what we listen to and what we watch and what we consume is super important in terms of focusing on the Lord and really getting in tune with his presence. And, like I was saying earlier, the stuff that I was listening to and the stuff that I was watching wasn't bad. It wasn't sinful. But the point is, it still made it hard for me to pay attention to God when I tried to separate myself in that prayer time with him. In our society today, we are constantly filled with an overwhelming influx of ideas and information and Instagram posts and all these new things that are just right in our face. And I don't really think that our brains were designed to handle that 24/7. We live in a world where it's go, 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 go. And it's, oh, this new article, this new article. We're always refreshing our Instagram pages and our Twitter feeds to find the newest news, to see what the biggest next thing is, to see what's trending. That's cool, and it's a really cool thing that technology has allowed us to get to that point, but it can be overwhelming sometimes. And I think that it really makes it hard for us to focus on the Lord and to separate our desire for instant news and instant gratification and all the cool little influx of all the things we've been listening to. It's hard to separate from that time to get to our presence with the Lord. Part of something that's really helped me over the last probably 2-3 months is one of two things. Either when I'm praying, I try to pray and spend my quiet time with the Lord before I listen to anything else, or before I watch any kind of TV or read a ton of news articles or go on social media. And I'm not successful with that all the time. It's something I'm working on. But I think it's really important that when we start with the Lord first, it's so easy to hear him. It's so easy to focus on his presence because we haven't been worrying about anything else. We haven't been thinking about anything else. And the other thing is just bringing it before the Lord and, saying, hey, God, what I'm listening to good? Is what I'm watching good? Is what I'm consuming good for me? Is it good for not only is it good information, but is it good for my soul? So really, the first thing that you guys should do when you are having a hard time hearing from the Lord, in my opinion, is to check your content. And before I get into my next point, I think I'm hearing something from our sportscaster down on the field of the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay.
And welcome to today's edition of Youth News. I am your host, Darla McButsandstuff. The Super Bowl is this weekend, and if you're anything like me, it's your favorite day to pretend what's going on, eat too many meatballs, and poorly toss a football around with your family. This year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will face off against the Kansas City Chiefs as Tom Brady vies to win his 79th Super Bowl. But it may not be easy for the Buccaneers, however. The NFL has just announced that the Bucs fans are not allowed to fire off cannons whenever the Bucs score. In other words, the most enjoyable part of the game has now been canceled, and you'll find me eating Doritos watching The Office in the room next door. For our next story today, in basketball news, this last week there were reports of a woman heckling the greatest basketball player of all time, LeBron James. The woman got increasingly upset and was eventually kicked out, leading LeBron to tweet after that game, "Courtside Karen was mad," which confirms that old saying, if LeBron James calls you a Karen, you can never step foot in a Lakers game ever again. In our final story today, it is Super Bowl Sunday. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will compete against the Kansas Chiefs, and I'm actually getting word right now, Tom Brady has been injured. He's fractured his left earlobe, and he will not be playing in today's Super Bowl. What are we going to do? I'm actually getting more word that Jaden as a party will be suiting up to lead the Bucs today. My source is telling me that when Tom Brady discovered that Jaden was playing his quarterback, he officially retired and gave all his rings to Jaden. Wow. And now my sources are telling me that it's expected that Jaden as a party will throw at least 1,000 yards today, and it will go down as a hero of the NFL. Well, I'm not surprised that Jaden will do that. He is an absolute unit on the football field. I'm your host, Darla McButsandstuff, and that's Youth News for today.
Jaden, I hope you lead the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to Super Bowl victory. I'll be rooting for them even more. So back to what I was saying earlier about hearing from the Lord in times when you feel like you are doing everything to hear from him and it's still hard to hear from him. My first point was to check your content, and my second is to leave your emotions at the door. Ecclesiastes 3, basically verses 1 through 8, it talks about how for everything there's a season, and it goes through all these different emotions. And I'm not going to read all of it, but it says there's a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to break down, a time to build up. And it goes through all these lists of emotions and feelings and actions, and it shows that emotions are good, right? We should feel emotions. As a human being, it's something we do. If we're not feeling an emotional response to something, then we kind of need to check ourselves. But emotions are natural, they're good. But at the same time, they can be really distracting. They can really hamper our walk with the Lord in terms of hearing from Him in prayer and in spending time within His presence. I know in Star Wars, my favorite character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever he's like training Anakin, whether it's in the prequel movies or in the Clone Wars TV show, he always talks about like, don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. And I know it's stupid, but at the same time, like, it's true. Like, a lot of times our feelings and our emotions can cloud our minds and make it hard for us to hear from the Lord because we're so focused on what's going on internally, what's going on with ourself. In Proverbs 25, verse 28, it says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. So if we don't have self-control over our emotions and over our feelings, it's basically like we're being overrun with all these different feelings that maybe they're from the Lord, maybe they're not. And that can be dangerous when we make decisions and act and follow through on actions that are based on emotions that aren't from God. I know that like sometimes those emotions get tied to like what people are telling you to do, what people are telling you to do with certain things. I know, and this is kind of tying to my last point too, about a month ago, I was making a really big decision in terms of like, okay, what am I going to do for my job? Because I'm graduating from college in May, and I'm having to figure out, okay, what's my career going to look like what's my life going to look like in June and July after I graduate. So the first thing I did, like I said earlier, was kind of check my content and say, okay, like God, like what am I listening to that's good for me, what's not? After that, one thing I did is I really wanted to try and leave my emotions at the door. And, you know, personally, like I like to share my experiences with all my friends, like what I'm going through, like, hey guys, like this is this cool opportunity I have. So like, what do you guys think about it? And that's good. But for me personally, like looking back on how I handled that like experience a month ago, I probably talked to too many people about it, where there were all these different voices telling me, well, I think you should do this. I think you should do this. Like, how do you feel about this? And I was overwhelmed with emotions. And there were my own personal emotions of both excitement and stress and wondering what I was going to do next. And there were also emotions of like, not only like happiness, but also anger from people because it was like, okay, like I'm frustrated with what they're telling me because I don't understand. So I was just feeling everything on the emotional spectrum within like a week. It was a roller coaster of emotions for about a week or two, trying to figure out what I'm gonna do with my job once I graduate college. And basically, I felt like God was telling me to, hey, like those emotions that you're feeling, like that's good, that's normal, that's natural, but leave those at the door. Don't bring those into your prayer time with me right now because those are coming from a ton of different people. It's not coming from you. And God wants you to share your emotions with Him. It talks about in Philippians praying about all things. But when you are coming to God and you're hearing all these different opinions from all these different people, when you're hearing all these different emotions from all these different people, it becomes really easy to be overwhelmed, where you're so overwhelmed that you're so focused on yourself that you can't even hear from Him. So I know personally what really helped me was putting all those emotions from everybody else, like putting them on the wayside and just saying, God, like, here's this decision I have to make. Here's how I feel about it. I'm stressed, but at the same time I'm excited, but I don't know what to do. Like, God, what do you want me to do? And only bringing your emotions to God and not having to worry about what everybody else is thinking. So yeah, leave your emotions at the door when you're coming to prayer time with God. That's something that's really helped me hear from the Lord in the seasons where it's tough to hear from Him. And my third and final point is to get alone with God. And I know we say it a lot, but I'm going to read this little 4-verse segment from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 9 through 13. And it says, it's about Elijah. And basically, Elijah was being hunted down by this woman named Jezebel. And he was like in fear that he was going to be murdered. He was going to be killed. Like, if you think you're going through something, and this is how I felt, but like, I was like, well, I've never been hunted down by anyone who's trying to murder me where I've had to run away and hide. So like my experiences that are tough, like don't compare to that. But basically in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 9, it says, after Elijah ran away, it says, then he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. So pause. Like, that's the one really key thing. Not just like saying like, okay, God, like, what am I going to do? Like, God's not a genie, you know, He's not a magic 8-ball that you kind of like shake up and like, there's an answer. So moving on, it says, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper, and when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and went out and stood at the entrance to the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So not only did Elijah have to really separate himself from everything going on to find that one spot where he knew that he would be able to be at peace and hear from the Lord, he had to wait. He had to wait in the Lord. He had to say, God, he was saying, God, what do I do? I'm scared. I'm going to be murdered. There's a whole kingdom of people hunting after me. What do I do? And he had to wait in the Lord. He had to wait for God to come in the way that God knew would be best. And I know with me, when going back to that big job decision I was trying to make, something that helped me a lot was having to sit in my prayer quiet time with God. For me, it's my backyard. I walked in my backyard. I was by myself. I'm just sitting there for a while, just saying, God, what do you want me to do? I'm in his word. I'm waiting on him. And it was just a couple days of processing my, like I said earlier, my emotions with the Lord, processing all the different things I had before me with the Lord. And if you're having a hard time hearing from God, the best thing that you can do, after checking all the things that you're consuming, after leaving all the crazy, overwhelming spectrum of emotions at the door, the next best thing you can do is not only getting alone with him, but waiting with him and saying, God, what do you want me to do? Bringing it to the Lord. Like I said earlier, God's not a genie. It's a relationship. So if you're having trouble hearing from God, if you're sitting, maybe you're in your house right now and you're saying, well, yeah, I'm spending time with God. I'm spending time in his word, but I don't know what to do. I'm not hearing from the Lord. The three things that I think you should do, the three things that, in my opinion, helped me so much over my walk with God, not only over my life, but over the last 3 months, are checking the things that you're consuming, bringing those to the Lord and saying, God, here it is. What do I do? Here's all the things that I'm consuming. Are they good for me? Are they edifying to my soul? And after that, leaving all that overwhelming emotion at the door, saying, God, here's how I'm feeling. How do you want me to process it? And not only after that, you're getting alone with God, but you're waiting on him. So I really encourage you guys to do those three things. I hope you have a great Sunday.